Hey kids, this is Ivan. How you doing? Do you feel like the system is broken? I got news for you. The system isn't broken. It's designed that way. Don't expect fairness from a system designed to keep people compliant. Now, this isn't a video to spark outrage, although it might spark a little bit of outrage. It's more about having clarity and a plan for strategic escape. So there's something I got interested in very recently. It's a quote by an Australian luxury property developer named Tim Gurner, who can be a little bit controversial, to say the least. And he said this somewhere in late 2023. He was addressing a group of investors, and what he said was, we need to see unemployment rise. Employees feel that the employer is lucky to have them. We need to remind them that they work for the employer, not the other way around. And well, this obviously got a lot of people upset, and this kind of went viral. But a lot of other businessmen said, some behind closed doors, anonymously, well, yeah, this is how we all think and how we all feel, but we just don't say that quiet part out loud. We don't say that in front of other people. And even some government officials said the same exact thing. What's terribly interesting is that all of this was predicted back in, I believe it's like 1943, by this Polish economist named Michael Kalecki. And he wrote this treatise called Political Aspects of Full Employment, in which he argued that capitalists oppose full employment, not for economic reasons, but for political ones, because full employment gives workers too much power, according to the laws of supply and demand. Unemployment disciplines the labor force. If you can just go get another job because pretty much everybody's employed, all of a sudden you have a lot more power over the employer. You can negotiate things like a fair raise, all that sort of stuff. But if the unemployment rate is high, well, now you're in a bind because that employer doesn't need you. They can just employ somebody else. So it's in the best interest of the upper class, the super rich, if you will, to have this high unemployment rate, to have this disciplined workforce that doesn't make trouble. Really kind of disturbing when you look at it that way. Labor needs to fear the system, to function as intended. And what's even more disturbing is that the government is complicit in this. Central banks like the Federal Bank of the United States, they raise interest rates on purpose to increase unemployment and to reduce wage pressure. They call it cooling the economy down, but it is designed to keep a certain number of people unemployed so that the workforce is obedient. That's not very cool, is it? That can make you a little bit mad. And the system is designed that way. It's also designed for people to work paycheck to paycheck, to be kind of in a bind, because then they'll be more compliant. And we're expected to consume all the time as well. That's another thing, is they want us to be working from paycheck to paycheck or living from paycheck to paycheck. Not just because we're only making a certain amount of money, but because we're spending all of it. We're buying all the stuff. And probably the most egregious thing that adds insult to injury, that's what I'm trying to say, is something that this Australian fellow said, as well as many other people have echoed, is this idea that you and I are in the financial straits that we are is because we consume too much. We buy avocado on toast and lattes, and that's why we can't buy houses or save money and all that kind of stuff. It's our fault. However, that's exactly where they want us to be. They want us to be living paycheck to paycheck, so we're dependent upon them. And they want us to buy all the stuff because guess who's selling it? They are. They want us to borrow the money from them and be paying the exorbitant interest rates. And this gaslighting of the average person, of the workforce, telling us it's all our fault, is kind of this diversionary tactic to keep us from realizing that all these things are being created by them. Now, at a point like this, you can be pretty mad. You should be pretty mad. So what do? How do we solve this? Well, we could take the standard route and, vote the bastards out of power and put our own political candidates in power instead, and people that we think would do a better job. However, experience has shown us that, well, it doesn't really matter who you vote for, party-wise or individual-wise. None of them seem to be willing to mess with their meal ticket, which, I got news for you, is not us. It's the super wealthy that are kind of financing everything. So they're not going to do anything to upset the balance, upset the apple cart. They're going to keep things the way it is. And, well, all right, well, what else do? We could be tempted at this point to grab the torches and pitchforks and, declare Bastille Day. And despite all the other very obvious problems with this route, which I will not mention because I think they're obvious, history has also shown us that typically what happens is when you oust a government, a leadership, whatever it happens to be, the ones that come into power next are as bad or even worse than the ones that went in there. And so to solve this problem, I'm going to take a metaphor from one of my other passions, which I normally don't talk about on this channel, which is keeping South and Central American cichlids. And these are fish from South and Central America, and with very few notable and wonderful exceptions, they're all pretty much shaped like sunfish and about that big. Some of them can get quite large. They are rather aggressive fish. They have wonderful behavior patterns, so they're neat to keep. But they are highly aggressive, especially with each other, and it's not unusual for them to kill each other through repeated harassment. So typically what happens, you have this maybe like a 6-foot tank, which most people would think was a big aquarium. It's not. That's the beginning of big. And you have a bunch of these, say, like highly aggressive fish in the tank. And what tends to happen is they quickly establish a pecking order, and then one fish ends up owning the entire tank. And they swim around in full dress and confidently, while the other fish get out of their way or maybe even cower. And they will spend a certain amount of their time every day bullying these other fish to the point where some of them never leave this one little area and, trying as best they can to remain hidden. Now, if you decide that fish is a troublemaker and you take them out of the tank, what happens is one of those fish that was cowering now becomes the new boss of the tank and does the same exact thing. This does not happen in the wild. In the wild, the same amount of fish that you would have in this 6-foot tank, 125 gallons, they're going to have a space, in the smallest of ponds, the size of your yard. And that's where they live. So any aggression that happens, you can watch them in the wild. If you're lucky enough to go down there, you can simply watch sunfish in North America. And they'll chase each other around. There'll be the nipped fin and whatnot, but there's no wholesale slaughter because they can get out of each other's way. The problem isn't the fish. The problem is the tank. And that increases aggression and increases these behaviors to the point where they're artificial. And it's not that different than what happens with people. Just like you take one leader out, through voting or through rebellion, the next leader is going to be just as bad. Just a new boss. A lot of these behavior dynamics exist because of how society is constructed. It's, to a large extent, an artificial construction, and it will increase this ability of some people to dominate other people, and we get stuck in the revolving credit card debt, and we get stuck in like, well, we need this job because there's only so many jobs to go around, and et cetera. All these sort of reasons. It's this sort of artificial set of constraints or dynamics because of the way society is set up. So what do you do in a case like this? You get out of the tank. That's your best option, is to get the heck out of that tank and be the one fish in your tank. You don't want to be the top dog and beating everybody else up. That's nasty. Well, how do you do that? Well, part of it is maybe you develop some different skills and become more marketable. So maybe part of it is that you just spend less, so you're less beholden to these people. But, the thing that's been screaming at me is, well, the best thing to do is go start a business, do something where you're not at the beck and call of an employer, where you don't have to worry about things like the unemployment rate because you've isolated or insulated yourself from that by doing something of your own. And yes, you'll have to deal with the markets and everything else like that, but it'll be you that's making the decisions and you that's in control. So you're no longer living in that bully fish's tank. Yes, you still have to deal with society, and there's nothing, society is a wonderful thing. There's a lot of great parts about it. However, you're going to escape that part. So to me, is that at the end of the day, looking at all the other possible avenues to rectify the situation, the one that keeps making the most sense to me is go start a business, go do something where you're not dependent on the super rich for everything. You know what I mean? Does that make any sense to you? Let me know your thoughts. Have you noticed the same phenomenon? What do you think about it? Have you kept fish? Take it easy, kids.